There was a 5-year window in aviation history when planes were being hijacked more than once a week, not once a year, once a week. And here is the part that nobody talks about. Almost everyone survived. I went through the records on every major hijacking since 1970, the golden age skyjackings, the hostage standoffs of the 80s and 90s, the deadliest one before 9/11, the modern ones you never even heard about. And across all of them, spanning 50 years, the survivors kept doing the same thing. One thing. It shows up in case after case after case, and it is not what you think it is, because it is not a trick or a move or a hiding spot. I am going to tell you exactly what it is, but for it to make sense, you need to see what I saw, in the order I saw it, because the answer changed shape one morning in September 2001, and if you only know half of it, you know the wrong half. Let's start in 1968. Between 1968 and 1972, there were 305 hijackings worldwide. In the United States, planes were taken so often that crews had a nickname for the whole phenomenon, the Cuba Run. A man stands up, claims he has a weapon, says, "Take me to Havana," and here is the number that should be impossible. Out of those 305 hijackings, only 46 people died. 305 armed takeovers of commercial aircraft, a survival rate that modern security experts still find remarkable. How? Because everybody on board followed the same unwritten rule, and I will get to it. But first you need to understand just how strange this era actually got. Hijacked passengers landing in Havana were treated like tourists. The Cuban government put them up while the paperwork got sorted. Time magazine in December 1968 ran actual advice for readers on what to do if their plane got hijacked. And I am quoting a real sentence from a real American magazine here. Relax. Most Cubans are indeed friendly and will make your layover as comfortable as possible. There are accounts of passengers buying rum and cigars before flying home. That is how routine this had become. It got strange enough that the U.S. government seriously considered building a fake Havana airport in southern Florida. A full decoy, so hijackers demanding Cuba could be tricked into landing on American soil, where the FBI would be waiting on the tarmac, dressed however the story required. The plan was rejected, partly for a very simple reason: it would only ever work once. Now, while all of this was happening in the cabin, something else was happening up front that no hijacker ever saw. Pilots had, and still have, a silent alarm. It is a 4-digit code, 7500. Punched into the aircraft's transponder, it instantly tells every radar screen tracking that plane that a hijacking is in progress. No announcement, no struggle. 4 digits, entered quietly, and the ground knows everything while the hijacker knows nothing. Air traffic control may even radio back, confirm squawking 7500, and all the pilot has to say is one word: affirmative. To anyone listening in the cockpit, it sounds like routine radio chatter. It is actually a distress call in plain sight. So the ground always knew. The crews were trained. And this is where the survivor's pattern starts to show itself, because official crew doctrine in this era was the exact opposite of everything you would assume. The FAA's approach, later formalized as the common strategy, was this: do not resist, comply, get the plane on the ground. And this is the part that shocks people. Crews were trained to actively stop passengers from playing hero. The thinking was simple, and for 30 years the math backed it up. Hijackers in this era wanted leverage: a flight to Cuba, a bag of money, a prisoner released. They needed the passengers alive, because living passengers were the entire point. Fighting created the one thing that got people killed: chaos in a sealed metal tube at 35,000 feet. And the data is brutal on when that chaos matters most. Hostage research cited by the FBI shows that over half of all hostage deaths happen in the first minutes of a takeover, the phase where the captor's adrenaline is highest, where their plan is most fragile, where one scream or one sudden movement can turn a bluff into a tragedy. Survivors, again and again across the records, are the people who went quiet, went still, and became unremarkable during exactly those minutes. There is even a psychological effect that negotiators learn to exploit. You know it by name: Stockholm Syndrome. It comes from a 1973 bank robbery, not a plane, but hostage negotiators applied its core lesson deliberately. Time humanizes. The longer a standoff runs, the harder it becomes for a captor to hurt the people they have spent hours sitting with, which is why negotiators slow everything down on purpose. A hijacking that survives its first hour statistically trends toward everyone walking off that plane. So that is the pattern, right? Stay calm, comply, let time do the work. That is the one thing. Case closed. Except it is not. Because I told you the answer changed shape, and it changed on the morning the common strategy met something it was never designed for. The 4 flights on September 11th were taken by men who had studied that doctrine and weaponized it. Compliance only works when the hijacker needs you alive, and for the first time, they did not. The passengers of United Flight 93 discovered this in real time on airphone calls, learning that other hijacked planes had already been flown into buildings. And in that moment, 40 ordinary people did something no training had ever asked of passengers. They concluded that the old rule no longer applied, and they acted. They did not save themselves. They saved whatever building that plane was flying toward. An aviation doctrine was rewritten around what they did. The cockpit is never surrendered again. Doors became bulletproof, blast-resistant, locked from the inside. The hijacker's original prize, control of the aircraft itself, effectively died that morning. But here is what almost everyone gets wrong. 9/11 did not make compliance obsolete. And the proof is a flight most people have never heard of. EgyptAir 181, March 2016. A man hijacks a plane wearing what he claims is a suicide belt and diverts it to Cyprus. Post 9/11 era, everyone on board knows how this could end. And what do the passengers do? They stay calm for 7 hours. One passenger calmly takes a photo standing next to the hijacker, half smiling. The standoff drains, the hijacker surrenders, and every single person walks off that plane. The suicide belt turns out to be mobile phone cases. The old rule, patience and compliance, worked perfectly because this was the old kind of hijacking, a desperate man who needed hostages, not casualties. And if you want the darkest proof of how much the details matter, look at the deadliest hijacking before 9/11. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, 1996. 3 drunk, erratic hijackers refuse to believe the plane lacks fuel to reach Australia and let it run dry over the Indian Ocean. Journalist Mohammed Amin spends his final minute standing at the cockpit door trying to talk them down. The plane ditches near a beach in the Comoros in view of tourists, and 125 of the 175 people on board die. But here's the detail from that crash that changed every safety briefing you have ever heard. Many of the victims survived the impact. They died because they inflated their life vests inside the cabin. As the water rose, the inflated vests pinned them against the ceiling, and they could not get down, could not swim out, trapped by the very thing meant to save them. That is why, on every flight you have taken since, the briefing says the same 7 words: do not inflate until outside the aircraft. That instruction is written in the memory of Flight 961. The reason none of this feels familiar is that hijackings have almost disappeared. Not because hijackers gave up, but because in January 1973, the FAA mandated screening of every passenger and every bag, and hijackings collapsed from hundreds to a handful, one of the sharpest drops in the history of any crime. Entire years now pass with 0. Your odds of ever needing any of this are microscopic, but you came here for the one thing, so let me give it to you properly, because now you can understand it. The survivors across 50 years of hijackings all did the same thing. They read which game was being played, and they played it correctly. From 1968 to 2001, the game was leverage, and the winning move was stillness, patience, compliance, letting time humanize everyone on board. After 9/11, the rule split in 2. If it is a hostage situation, the old move still wins, and EgyptAir 181 proved it. But if the cockpit is the target, the contract is broken, and passengers act because Flight 93 rewrote what the correct move is when the hijackers do not need you alive. The one thing was never a single action. It was knowing which era's rule applies to the plane you are sitting on. The survivors were not the bravest people on board, and they were not the strongest. They were the ones who correctly answered a single question under more pressure than most of us will ever feel. What does this person actually want? If this kind of deep dive is what you are here for, hit subscribe, because this is exactly what this channel does. And there is a video on your screen right now about the survival engineering hidden in plain sight on every flight you have ever taken. The 90-second rule, the black triangles, the cockpit escape rope. It pairs perfectly with this one. Watch it next. Before you go, drop a comment. Which fact from today actually got you? The fake Havana airport, the silent 7500 code, or the life vests on Flight 961? Because every time this topic comes up, the answers split 3 ways, and I want to see where you land.